What's up, Hoopball Nation? It's Brandon Marcus from the Hoopball Clippers podcast. We're chatting about an exciting time in Clipperland with Kawhi Leonard and Paul George looking to lead the team to an NBA title. Tune in to hear guests ranging from TV voice Brian Seaman and radio voice Noah Eagle to various beat writers and team bloggers. Follow the podcast on Twitter at HoopballClips and follow me at BD Marcus. Looking forward to having you tune in.
The following is a Hoopball presentation. Welcome to the Fantasy NBA Today podcast.
Good morning, everybody. Welcome to Fantasy NBA Today. This is your Tuesday edition. September the 8th, we roll along through another week of NBA playoff action. I am your host, Dan Besbris. Thanks, as always, for tuning in. You can find me on Twitter at Dan Besbris, DANBESBRIS. This is a Hoopball presentation. Hoop-ball.com is the website, at Hoopball Fantasy on Twitter, or at Hoopball Tweets if you want to see everything that's going on over at Hoopball. And right now, all the things churning out on the Hoopball Network, the Box Score Breakdown with David Bracey, an episode first thing this morning, just posted. DFS Today posted last night. A Clippers recap of the Clippers win over the Nuggets posted last night as well. Brandon Marcus, the fantastic host of Hoopball Clips, had Chris Murch on to break down the conclusion of Clippers win over the Nuggets. We'll, of course, talk about that game a little bit later on today's podcast. And let's see. Stephen Williams has your DFS delivery, the written piece that's free during the playoffs. It's part of our premium package for next year if you actually wanted to get involved in that. And, of course, Santino and Steve have the DFS Today pod from last night. So lots of good stuff still at Hoopball every morning. Strongly recommend you guys check that out. And Today in Sports Betting, that should be coming out, I think, in the next couple of hours as well over on our at Hoopball Gaming Network. At Hoopball Gaming is the Twitter handle for that. Hoopball Official is the Hoopball Instagram page. If you haven't followed that already, again, that is Hoopball Official. Let's just do what we've been doing on this podcast at this point. I think today's show will be a tiny bit shorter, although we'll wait and see, if only because yesterday's games, I don't feel like revealed a ton about potential changes or plans going forward. We'll talk about tonight's ball games first. Miami is at Milwaukee. Miami favored by 4. On the technical road. This is Game 5 in that series, so this will be a Milwaukee digital home crowd on the video boards around the arena. Of course, the big question going into this game is the status of Giannis Antetokounmpo, who turned his ankle a second time in that Game 4 win in overtime. Didn't finish the ball game. He played just the first 11 minutes, was humming prior to hurting himself. Giannis had, what did he have, 19 points in 11 minutes or something crazy? Yeah, 19 points on 8 out of 10 shooting in 11 minutes. He was steamrolling Miami. The line, if we're just reading the tea leaves here, the line being Miami by 4 seems to indicate that Giannis is not going to be playing in this game, but we will wait and see. He didn't look like someone that should be playing in 2 days when he left the arena 2 days ago. Of course, the other side of this equation is it sounds like the next NBA season is not going to be starting in December, probably more like January. So if indeed Giannis does play, the big fear, of course, is something that keeps him out for a calendar year. But if it's an aggravated ankle sprain that they're worried about, and I'm doubting that that's really the main focus at this point, a loss here, and you probably have, what are we looking at here? 1, 2, 3, 4 months-ish. It's probably 4 months to the start of the next regular season, roughly, from now. So who knows? Here's the thing. All we can do is look at the information we have in front of us. He's listed as questionable and a game-time decision. But the line, which is available, it's not off the board. This is the kind of game where you'd think, if there really was a lot of confusion over Giannis, this feels like a line they would probably just leave off the board. But odds makers know they're not getting an answer on Giannis until right before game time. There's positively no reason why the Bucks should tip their hand until the teams take the court, 9 minutes before the ball game starts. Simple fact that they're holding it back, to me, says he's not playing. because Boston has game planned this entire series for a Milwaukee team that's Giannis-centric, Miami, I should say, not Boston, has put up a wall on Milwaukee every time Giannis has brought the ball down the court. So I think what the Bucks are doing is saying, look, we probably don't think he's playing, but we got to keep this under wraps because we don't really want the Heat to completely adjust their game plan for Chris Middleton offense. Now, that said, Middleton hit a bunch of shots in that last ball game. Miami is the better team at this point. They've been playing better throughout the series. They most likely finish the series today with or without Giannis, because if he plays, he's not playing at full speed, and that's probably not great for the Bucks, particularly on the defensive side anyway. That gives Miami a tiny advantage. And if he doesn't play, well, then the Bucks don't have their best player because he's hurt. Either way, Miami's in the driver's seat. They're favored by 4. I don't think I can touch the side in this ballgame. I don't think I can touch the total because I really don't know how the tempo changes. Remember, when Damian Lillard was ruled out for the Blazers and he left the bubble, that next ballgame became a prototypical one team, the better team, the Lakers, not taking the lesser team seriously anymore because they didn't have the guy that was floating them. When Dame went out, the Lakers were like, okay, yeah, we'll sleepwalk through this one. We'll just take care of them by being better than they are over 48 minutes instead of trying to turn them into a pulp the way the Lakers did games 2, 3, and 4 in that series. They were trying to grind Portland into dust, and then in game 5, it was like, all right, well, we'll just outshoot them. So if Giannis doesn't play, you might get a little bit of that we'll outshoot them mentality from Miami. I don't know. I mean, they're exceedingly well-coached team, and Jimmy Butler doesn't seem like the type to take his foot off the gas for more than a couple of minutes, and it might have even been in that last ballgame when Giannis went down when the Heat took their foot off the gas. So I want nothing to do with this game before the action begins. I think, if you get word that Giannis is playing and the line jumps in Milwaukee's direction in any meaningful fashion, I might take the Heat at that point. Like, if I can get the Heat at closer to a pick'em, that would be something I'd keep an eye out for. But I don't think Giannis is playing. We'll see. I mean, again, I don't know. I'm reading the tea leaves here. I don't think Giannis is playing, and I don't think I'm touching this thing before the ball game begins. I'd be very surprised if I did. I'm much more interested in the other ball game tonight. The Lakers favored by anywhere from 4.5 to 5.5 over the Rockets, depending on what book you're at. The more public sports books, the Lakers are a 5.5 point favorite. At the sharper sports books, the Lakers are a 4.5 point favorite. Teams betting on the underdog Rockets. I am a Laker fan, which makes it very hard for me to say the following. I don't think the Lakers win this ball game. And if they do, I think it's at the closing bell. I think we do finally have, I don't want to say a good ball game, because I think the first two have actually been a lot of fun, even though the Lakers got whipped in the fourth quarter in the first game and then came back and kind of did the beating in the fourth quarter of game 2. Both of those games were actually relatively tight at certain points. They were tight enough. Lakers got out to a big lead in the first half of game 2. Houston came back, took the lead in the third quarter. So that game was close going into the fourth. Game 1 was close about halfway through the third quarter. That's when the Houston Rockets started to pull away from L.A., and the Lakers never really bounced back. Here's what, and I have a lot of thoughts on this particular series because it's the one that I'm making sure to watch every second of the ball game because, 1, money to be made, and 2, Laker fan hasn't been able to watch his team in the playoffs in a half dozen years. On the side, I think the Rockets cover because I don't think they expect the Lakers to make the same quantity of shots they did in game 1. Yes, or game 2, excuse me. Yes, here's the counter argument to that. Yeah, a lot of the Lakers' shots were high percentage looks, putbacks, AD, mid-range jumpers over guys 7 inches shorter than him, where basically he's just taking uncontested 15-footers at that point. And he's a guy that's going to make probably about 60% of those. So, AD shooting 62%, 63% is actually not that insane against this Rockets team. Even LeBron going, 9 for 17 in this one, 10 for 17 in game 2, even that is actually something he could replicate. Those are not the guys that I think are going to see differences on a game-to-game basis. It's all the other dudes. Rondo, 10 points, 9 assists, 5 steals? I don't think so. And a three-pointer? I mean, the mid-range jumpers were great for him, but 4 for 9 is actually better than I expect. Keefe, 6 out of 8, including 4 three-pointers in a single quarter. No, not going to happen again. I don't care if he's completely wide open. He's not shooting 75%. Kuz, 6 out of 7, including a three-pointer. Yeah, a lot of his looks were right in front of the rim, so there's a little bit of that going on. But he's not shooting 6 out of 7. Danny Green is probably not going to shoot 3 for 6 and hit 3 three-pointers. The Lakers' supporting cast, with the exception of Caruso, who didn't really get involved on the offensive end in Game 2, all overperformed their expected marks. Like I said, LeBron, AD, those guys are so good against a micro-ball Houston team. Those guys are so good at getting the looks they want. LeBron getting the switches, so he's working on Daniel House and Russell Westbrook, or even Eric Gordon, or Jeff Green, basically so he's not dealing with PJ Tucker or Rob Covington. Yeah, he's going to just take those guys and he's going to go right through them. Lakers going to try to move bodies around so LeBron doesn't have to face a packed paint. If he does, you'll see a kick out. You might see more of that. You might see the Rockets daring the other guys to beat them a little bit more in Game 3. Same deal with Anthony Davis. If he's going to get a clean 15-footer over somebody 7 inches shorter than him, he's going to take those shots. He's going to get good looks. He's going to get offensive rebounds because he's by far the biggest and most athletic dude on the floor in this series. And it's not close. Like, Rockets don't have anyone that can reach up into the sky where Anthony Davis can reach up into the sky. JaVale McGee is questionable for this game with his sore ankle. He's actually really helpful for them at the start of the first and third quarters for basically keeping the Rockets from just racing out and bombing three-pointers. On the other side, and again, this is all going to lead me to a theory at the end of this. On the other side, the Rockets had so many open looks, it was crazy. They had 22 three-pointers, and it wasn't that weird. It wasn't that weird that Eric Gordon hit 6 three-pointers, Tucker hit 4. Okay, so maybe PJ doesn't go 7 for 10 in this ball game, but Covington hit 4 three-pointers, House hit 3. These guys were wide open. Gordon and Tucker in particular were wide open on their three-pointers. And they made them. Houston at 109 points is pretty close to where I'd expect to see them. But the Lakers at 117 was too high. That number was too high. Neither team took that many free throws in the last ball game, which I think is probably better for the Lakers, since we know how much the Rockets, and Harden in particular, who did take 13 himself, but they do rely on him getting a bulk of his points at the free throw line. Lakers have decided to make this series as much non-Harden as humanly possible, and they got burned by that in the last ball game. So my questions going into Game 3 are, do the Lakers have their rotations a little more locked down to where some of these flash double teams they're sending at Harden don't result in 2 quick passes and a Tucker or Gordon wide open three-pointer? You can't be doing that. That's too easy. Something simple the Lakers could actually consider trying would be trying to slow the Rockets bringing the ball into the front court. Just shorten their shot clock by 2-3 seconds so you're not chasing quite as long. Because for the Rockets, if the Lakers don't do something wild, like send a double team sprinting at Harden, he's going to try to get a switch. He's going to try to move so that he gets a big man on him, which is not so much because he loves facing up on Anthony Davis, but because he knows that if he gets past AD, there's no one behind him. There's no rim protection then. So that's going to take a few seconds. Lakers can fight over one screen, and then maybe the next one they get the switch. And that's going to take 3-4 seconds for Harden. And then there's the rotations, there's the drive, all that stuff. 8-9 seconds, whatever it takes for the Rockets to run that offense. If the Lakers have good rotations and force the Rockets to make an extra 1-2 passes or another drive and kick, that 8 or 9 seconds becomes 12, 13, 14 seconds. If you force the Rockets to take 6-7 seconds to bring the ball into the front court instead of 3 or 4, it shortens the number of times you have to rotate. You have to be in the right spot on defense. I think that's a simple thing the Lakers could consider, is have, Rondo or Caruso apply a little ball pressure in the backcourt, Or maybe even make someone else bring the ball into the front court besides Harden because you know they're going to get it back to James to start their offense. All these things shave time off of what Houston can accomplish. The game slowed down a little bit in Game 2 compared to Game 1, which is hard to believe because, again, the total was 226 in Game 2, and it was lower than that in Game 1 because the Lakers just weren't playing well in the second half in particular. But the game actually did slow down. You saw more set pieces on the offensive end from both teams. Total in the first game was 209. So it actually went up. What I'll tell you right now is that the 209 from the first game is actually probably a little bit closer to what the expected final number is for this ball game coming up tonight. I've got it somewhere in the 214 range, or 214 to 216, as opposed to 226. And so I like the under in this game. And I like the Rockets, unfortunately. I wish I didn't feel that way, but they were within 8 points in that last game, and I don't know that the Lakers' role players could possibly shoot the ball any better. I think both teams play better defense. I think the role players on the Lakers in particular take a step back. I think you see the role players on Houston likely take a small step back as the Lakers close outs a little bit better. You might see more James Harden. You're probably going to see too much Russell Westbrook after he got clowned for how poorly he played in the last ball game. I like Houston, and I like the under. Probably the under more, even, if you're going to go in that direction. Here's what happened yesterday on the NBA the NBA landscape. Boston beat the snot out of Toronto. Do I need to go into a long thing on this ball game? I don't even know that I do. Freddie VanVleet had 18 for the Raptors, and that was about as close as they came to someone having an okay ball game. They were awful. Ibaka turned his ankle. He's questionable for the next ball game. Anunoby finally had a poor shooting game. He tried his best to keep them within striking distance for about a quarter while getting offensive rebounds, but that wasn't super helpful. Kyle Lowry was oddly disengaged. I saw some theories floating around on Raptors Twitter that basically by playing their starters like 42 minutes the last couple of ball games to get back into it, they just kind of ran out of gas in this one. I don't know if that's true. Funny thing is, offensively, Boston was only pretty good. Jason Tatum finally had a slow ball game, but Jaylen Brown played better. Kemba looked better in this one. Daniel Tice was very good. You know how we feel about that situation. Boston likes what they've got there. They went heavy on their usual 5 in this one with a nod of the cap to Brad Wanamaker, who played 28 minutes off the bench. He got the whatever you want to call it, the Gordon Hayward minutes in this one. But it was mostly Jaylen Brown and Kemba. Those two guys had 48 points between the two of them. And then, Tice 15, Tatum 18, Smart 12, that kind of stuff. Boston just shot the ball better, and their defense was awesome. Toronto couldn't generate any open looks on the offensive side. I'm truly concerned that Toronto might have sort of fired their last bullet. They're 2.5-point underdogs for the ball game tomorrow, but we'll get into that a little bit more on tomorrow's podcast. Just from a basketball standpoint, this was a beating. Toronto was never really in it. Second game yesterday was more interesting. Clippers beat the Nuggets 113-107. This was a ball game that the Nuggets were they were competitive the whole way through. Clippers just outplayed them late. Nikola Jokic got Ivica Zubac in foul trouble, which is something we figured would happen pretty much throughout this series. Jokic, I think what I said was, look, if Jokic can go to work on Rudy Gobert, who, yes, he has lost the step, but this is a defensive player of the year type, then he's going to just annihilate Ivica Zubac, and he did. Jokic had 32, 12, and 8, and frankly should have had more. Because Jamal Murray, you got bad Jamal in this ball game, and I'm sure Pat Beverly's gonna take the credit for that. But at the same time, Beverly only played 21 minutes. He's on a minutes restriction. This was just, Beverly out there to annoy Murray, to try to get him off to a slow start. And we've seen that when you can get Jamal Murray off to a slow start, he has a lot of trouble getting it revved up partway through the ballgame. He's sort of he's an on or off kind of guy. Michael Porter Jr. played better for the first time in a few playoff games. Gary Harris has been really, really helpful for Denver. Jeremy Grant was quiet. Paul Millsap was quiet, but he has been the whole playoffs so far. So, I mean, in this one, they just, they needed more from Jamal Murray. That's what it ended up coming down to. Clipper side, Paul George woke up. He went 12 for 18, had one of his better shooting games. Kawhi was solid, 23, 14, and 6. And then they didn't need much from the other guys. Marcus Morris had 12. Lou Williams had 10. Montrez had 11. This was a battle of superstars, and the Clippers superstars prevailed. What I do like going forward, and we'll talk more about this on tomorrow's show when their next game, Clippers and Nuggets next ball game, is coming up. This game finished 113-107, and there was really only one factor in this game that pointed to a potential for more points, and that was the Nuggets only taking 10 free throws in the ball game. Most of the Clippers' fouls were non-shooting fouls. Jokic, high turnover count. He had 7. Clippers had 17 turnovers, and the Nuggets had 10 steals, so pretty good number of live ball stuff. At the next, I'm looking at the next ball game, and I'm saying, look, this is another series where the tempo is slowing. Game 2, slower than Game 1. Game 3, slower than Game 2. It's moving in that direction. And if you wipe out the live ball turnovers, and the Clippers shooting 55%. Although we've seen, with the way the Nuggets play defense, teams can shoot 55% against them. But everything to me is pointing to an under in the next ball game between these two teams. And again, we'll go into a bit more detail on that on tomorrow's podcast when their next game is coming up. Amazingly, that's about it. The only news, we mentioned Serge Ibaka turning his ankle. The only other news is that Will Barton is actually now apparently trying to figure out a way to get back into the bubble. Supposedly he has not yet ruled out a return in this series if the Clippers and Nuggets can go deep enough. Of course, with no travel, they're playing every other day, so it does shorten these playoff series a tiny bit and the amount of time that someone like Barton might have to get back in. Not that it would. I mean, that's not going to make a big difference anyway. Dude hasn't played in forever. Gary Harris has actually been able to get revved up quicker than I would have expected. Barton would be helpful. That's for damn sure. You could throw him in there instead of this sort of languishing old Paul Millsap, and that would be useful for them. Probably open things up a little bit more, but I don't think it's happening. I wouldn't hold my breath on that front. Speaking of holding your breath, that would be something you could do underwater. You know what else you can do underwater? You can manscape with the Lawnmower 3.0 with waterproof technology in the latest iteration of Manscaped's signature sideburn trimmer. It's waterproof. It's got a built-in LED. It's got a 90-minute charge. And, of course, as always, it is pinch-free. Go to manscaped.com. Coupon code is hoopball20 for 20% off and free shipping on your order at manscaped.com. Again, that coupon code is hoopball20. Hoopball20. Hoopball20 is the promo code. Make sure to get that lawnmower. We love working with these guys. Great company, great product. And they have other smaller stuff, too, if you want to check that out. They've got a ear and nose hair trimmer. They've got standard blades for traditional shaving, if that's something you'd like to do for, shaving your cheeks or whatever you're working on. Face cheeks, you sick puppies. They've got a shaving mat you can put on the ground. It's actually designed to look like a newspaper, which is kind of fun. They've got powders. They've got lotions. They've got boxers, swag, whatever. Manscaped.com, coupon code hoopball20. I can't wait for another day of playoff basketball. I really can't. Games are actually a little bit later today, I think. We're back to the 3:30 and 6 p.m. starts here on the Pacific Coast. 3:30 and 6 p.m. Again, looking at the games tonight, no real feelings on Miami, Milwaukee. Lakers, Rockets. I like the Rockets, and I like the under in that game, which I know is a weird pairing because you'd figure if the Rockets are keeping it tight, then it's not a super high scoring, or it would be a high scoring game. I actually feel the opposite. I think the Lakers are the team that's trying to push the pace and sort of break up a Houston packed paint situation, get their looks easier for the role players, and get driving lanes for LeBron and AD before Houston can pack all of their small guys in, because that's the only way they keep the Lakers away from the bucket. Meanwhile, on the other side, I think the Rockets prefer the half court because they know that with Harden, they can get what they want whether they're moving quickly or slowly. So the Lakers want to try to chew clock on the defensive side. They want to run on the offensive side. The Rockets, I think, are going to be sending a lot of guys back to prevent transition. Rajon Rondo actually for all of his warts in Game 1, he did a really good job of getting the Lakers into transition stuff in Game 2. A lot of that, the live ball turnovers, that stuff is coming down. I'm looking hard at the under in that ball game. So we'll see. That ball game's still 8.5 hours away. Game 1, Miami-Milwaukee, only about 5.5 hours from now. And that is your show for this lovely Tuesday, folks. I know, again, these shows are a bit shorter right now, but we got no fantasy to talk about. And until they tell us when next season is starting, we can't really plant our flag in a schedule or a plan going forward. Big thank you, by the way, to our buddies over at VSiN, Vegas Sports and Information Network. My good friend Gil Alexander had me on today. Again, Tuesday mornings, you can go check out the replay of a numbers game. That's Gil's show. We talked about these games from a betting standpoint as well. And then again, if you're into the betting stuff, which I know we're doing a lot of that right now, Today in Sports Betting is the name of our sports betting show. If you want to be a part of our team, hit me up on Twitter at Dan Besbris, DanBesbris. That is it for real this time. Have a great Tuesday, everybody. Back at you tomorrow morning, same time, same place. This is Fantasy NBA Today, a hoopball presentation. So long.
This has been a Hoop Ball presentation.